everybody, this is Lloyd here with Just Got Played, and today I have a game review for you. I am reviewing today RONE Invasion. This game is going to be live on Kickstarter by the time you're watching this video, and I'm specifically going to be talking about the solo/co-op mode where you play against the AI. But before I get into my likes and dislikes, I'm going to tell you how to play the game. So take it away, Lloyd. This is RONE Invasion. This is a 1 to 2 player or expandable up to 4 player co-op / competitive / solo deck builder / dice builder. Okay. I'm going to specifically go over the co-op / solo mode today, but the player steps and all of the rules that go with the player are applicable to competitive play. The only thing you won't have to worry about is the AI opponent. So, without getting too deep into the weeds, let's go ahead and take a look at the different parts of the boards, and then we'll go over how the game actually works. So over here, you have the player board. On the top, you have your defense total, and then you have your life total. So I will circle back to these once we get to those. On the left here, you have your base, and this is where your permanents will go. Down here in the bottom, this is where you're going to play your cards. Up here to the top, this is where you're going to put cards that you want to train. So this is how you recruit. And we'll come back to how cards recruit and get into your deck a little bit later on. This game also has a discard pile. So the discard pile are for cards that you actually play. And then once they're done being played, they're going to move to the discard pile. But this game also has a secondary discard called the garbage dump. So cards that you don't play or certain effects will cause you to put cards into the garbage dump. Now, the garbage dump is bad. You don't want to have cards in there. And I'll explain what the garbage dump is and how it works a little bit later on, because the AI player also has a garbage dump. So down the side here, you have a spot for stored resources. Down here in the middle, you have spare parts action. And then here is where your deck goes. And this, once you hit the bottom of your deck and you have to reshuffle, that it's called reinforcing. You reinforce your deck. And this has some rules about what you're going to do when you have to shuffle your deck. So that is the human board, the player board. Let's go over and take a look at the AI board. So the AI board has a series of rounds across the top. Here, these are going to be spots where cards from this deck are going to come out. And these are cards that are going to be able to get recruited by the AI during their turn. However, if you notice, there's some text on these spots. And whenever the card gets actually recruited from here and comes down into their discard pile, these effects are going to fire off, and they're all negative. So you want to try and stop the AI from training cards and getting them, because when this happens, it's bad. It hurts you very much. So that's where their recruit row is going to come from. They have their deck here, which again, it has some specific rules of when they have to reshuffle. They have their discard pile and a garbage dump, just like over here. This little section here is where you're going to deploy cards. And deploying card is basically taking cards out of the deck and placing them here to be fought. And we'll come back to how deploying cards works. Over here, you have additional player actions. So this is very specific to the AI, to the player versus AI, the co-op and the solo versions of the game. And this allows you to use different resources to do extra things that you can't do in the competitive game. Also down here on this side of the board is the protocols refresh. And this has very specific rules of when the AI will get to refresh their protocol cards. And then down here is where the protocols are. And the protocols, again, are always bad. They're permanents. They're going to fire off at certain points throughout the game. And then at certain points, they're going to refresh. And you want to try and mitigate these from happening as much as possible. So now that we kind of know all of the different areas of the player boards, let's take a look at the different decks. So over here, these are free starter cards. They don't have a cost. These you get to recruit using some of these spare actions, and there might be some cards in the deck that also allow you to get these cards. This is your main recruitment deck, so this just has tons of cards They're not all unique. There are some duplicates and triplicates and stuff in here, but there is a ton of cards in this deck. And this is where you're going to be building your deck from. This here is the technology deck. So the technology are permanent cards. They're going to come out over here. And there are some rules to how many of these you can get that are in the competitive game. And I'm not quite sure about the co-op. I didn't see anything specific, but there are rules about how many you can actually get. These over here are all your different screws, which are going to go on the dice, and I'll come back to the dice. These are the different tokens. So you have a reroll token that allows you to reroll a die. You have spare parts token. Now this is for cards that generate spare parts, and the spare parts aren't on the card, but we'll go ahead and take a look at the card in a minute as well. It's just a reminder token. And then these are technology tokens, and these work differently depending on who has them. And we'll come back to those as well. Over here on the AI side, this is their main deck, and they're going to get a starter deck of a certain amount of cards, and the game book tells you how to set those cards up. This is the protocols deck, and so they're going to get a random one of these at the beginning of the game, and then throughout the game they'll get more at specific times. And then this is their recruitment deck. So this is just where all of the bad cards that they are trying to recruit are in here. And these all have different stats and whatnot on them. So the basic structure of a turn is the AI player goes first. You're going to advance the round. Then you're going to check if there's any beginning of turn effects. If there's no beginning of turn effects, you're going to go ahead and deploy cards. So deploying cards, the AI will put out cards based on how many players there are and how many protocol cards there are in this in play. And the way these cards work, essentially they do have a deployed effect. So whenever they deploy, they typically do something. It may be to store resources. It may be to flip out more cards. They may automatically attack you. And the cards have some effects or some stats down here at the bottom. So from left to right, they're going to have, if we look at these two combined, we can see all four stats. So they have a ranged attack. And a ranged attack ignores your defense and goes straight to your life, which is bad. Melee hits your defense first. And as long as you have a shield, then they won't hit your life. Next up is their defense. So right now, this card would have 2 defense, and then they have 2 life. And the way the cards work is whenever you play one, first you do the deployed action, and then however many cards you play, you slide the other one in on top. And if you notice, there's a line here. So there's some text above the line, and then there's some stats below the line. So basically, you're going to stack these cards up, however many they are. And you're going to look at, on the top card, whatever's above the line, below the line, and then whatever's showing on the cards underneath it. And that's how many, that's all of the stats. So this one has 3 melee, 1 shield, and 3 life. Whenever you kill this card, it's going to go away. And then now the next guy has 3 melee, 2 shields, and 2 life. And then if you can kill this card, then the final person has 1 ranged attack, 1 melee, and 2 life. However, the cards actually need to survive in order to use those attacks. So after the cards deploy, they're going to check to see if there's any cards up here that they can recruit. Now, the way they recruit cards, if there's any cards that they can train, because this game has 2 different terms. It has recruitment and training. Recruiting means a card comes from here and goes out. A card that is trained means that it's gotten enough resources in order to bring it into your deck. So we'll just take a look at this guy. If there were 3 screws on top of this card, then at this particular step in the game, this card would destroy 2 of these resources because it only costs 2, and then it would get trained and come down here into the discard pile. Once that happens, this effect is going to go off. Now that happens for all of the cards. So in a standard game, all of these spots would be filled. And throughout the game, they'll start to get more and more resources accruing up here. And then at this particular step, they're going to check. And they may be able to recruit 1 card, or they may be able to recruit multiple cards in or train multiple cards in a single turn. So assuming they trained this card, this effect would go off. You would do what it says. And then later on, this will get filled back in. So once they've done the train action, then they're going to come down here and check for the refresh protocols. So in order to refresh these protocol cards, they would need to have tokens on them equal to the amount of players that are in the game. So if there's one player in the game and they have one technology token, then if this card has been used this turn, they would get to refresh it. And then the next step would be to actually use it. So the protocol cards are a one-time use until they get refreshed. So they would activate, they would do something very bad, and then they're going to stay that way until the AI can get another technology token. So that's pretty much it for their turn. At this point, their turn is over. Now we're going to come over to the player turn. So the player turn is broken up into several steps. First of which is drawing your cards. So the first thing you want to do is draw X amount of cards. Now, unlike most deck builders, this game doesn't have a set amount of cards that you draw every turn. It's a bit of push your luck. You can draw as many cards as you want on a turn. However, you have to keep in mind that number one, in order to pay for these cards, you need to be able to get these resources. And number two, the more you draw, the closer you get to your deck having to be reinforced, which is bad. So say I drew all of these cards. In order to pay for all of these cards, I would need a green, a random color, a black, a blue, a green, a yellow, and a red. So to pay for these cards, there's a couple different ways to do it. Number one, off the dice. And number two is off of any stored resources. However, you only store resources in a very particular case. So in this case, what we would do is the next step after we draw our cards is we would take our dice and roll them. So on this turn, we would have gotten these particular resources. So I can look at what I have here, and I can only pay for certain cards. So I have to pick and choose what I want to pay for. I have a black and a blue, so I could play this card. I have a red and a yellow, so I could play this card. So let's say I played those two cards. These two cards are not going to be able to get played, or these three cards. So once your turn is over, you're going to put these cards, once you're done with this step, these cards are going to go into your garbage dump. And once they go into the garbage dump, you are going to get the resources that are shown. So in this case, I would get one black, and I'd put the black on there. I'm going to get two greens. And then I would get two greens. And then I can get a wild. So when I get a wild, I can choose any color I want, but it has to go down here in the wild section. So let's just get a blue. So that's one way to get resources. Another way to get resources is to not use your dice. If you don't use your dice, then anything that's on here, you could also store. So say I just didn't use the yellow and the red, I could store a yellow and a red resource. All right. So I kind of skipped ahead to show you how you store resources since we were talking about them. But part of the step, once you've rolled, you can then do a bunch of actions in your next step. So during this point is where you decide what cards you're going to play. You can use these stored resource actions over here. You can also use your leader card. So you can use any cards that are in play. And you can also so during this part of the game, you can do a series of actions. You can play cards from your hand. You can use these stored resources to do these particular actions over here. You can do any of your hero or permanent actions. And from that point, you're going to move on once you've played all of your cards. So let's say we have these particular cards in play. So looking at this one, it says that we can deal 3 and recycle 1 card. So let's just assume we had a card here and we had a card here. So this lets me deal 3 melee damage. So if I look over here, this particular character has three. He has 3 shields. So this 3 would basically punch through his melee, and then that's about it. This guy would allow me to deal 1 direct damage to him and put some cards in the dump. So let's just say that I got enough cards, enough damage to take out these guys. If I shot this guy, he goes away. Then the next one would come out. So let's just leave it there. Let's say I got enough to deal with those people. When you're given the chance to recycle a card, you can take a card from either here, or even a card in your hand and put it back on the top of your deck. Now you can't go through your piles. So if there were multiple cards in a pile and you chose to recycle, you can take the top card of that pile and put it into your deck. Once you've finished with your action phase, you then have the chance to use your spare parts. So down here in the bottom of the card, these cards generate spare parts. So a list of actions you can do are here, and they all cost a certain amount of parts. So once you've used up all of your spare parts, they don't carry over from round to round. You either use them or you lose them. You're going to discard the rest of your cards, store any resources that are going here, and then you can recruit any cards that are out. You can train any cards that are out. So how do we train? So there's a couple different cards that allow you to recruit. And basically when you recruit, you're going to draw 3 cards off the top of the deck. You're going to choose one you want, and you're going to put it down in your training center. The rest of the cards are going to get destroyed. Now, throughout the game, you need to get a certain amount of screws on this card to recruit him, or to train him. This particular character takes 4 screws. So throughout the game, there's cards that are going to generate screws. In this particular case, this leader gains you 2 screws. So if this card was out, you could gain 2 screws for that leader. And these are cumulative. So they will just stay there until you get enough in order to recruit that, in order to train that card. This card here would also gain you 2 screws. So had that card been out whenever I played this card, I would have gotten 2 screws for it. So now once we're at this phase, the game phase next is to train any cards that are up here. So I can take these things off, the screws, and put this card into my discard pile. And then at some point, I'll be able to get that card into my deck. That is the end of the player phase. And then we're going to go back to the cleanup phase. But this is all about the AI. So at this point, the AI is going to check to see if there are any empty spots. If there are, it's going to recruit a new card. And then it's going to attack with these cards that are left. So in this case, this one does 3 melee damage. So you would take 3 damage from this card, and then it's going to go into the discard pile, and whatever color icon is up here, it's going to store that resource. And it's going to store it on the matching color on the board. So then the next card is going to do what it does. So this one does 1 range damage and 1 melee damage, and it stores a yellow. So throughout the game, if you leave cards alive here, it's going to feed into these stores. Also, when these cards come out, a lot of them automatically store resources up there. And then that is very bad because it allows them to not only get a card and build their deck, it also allows these very nasty effects to go off. So both AI and human players have some rules here for whenever they need to reshuffle their deck. So let's just go through the AIs real quick. So the AI is going to check how many players are in the game. So if there's only 1 player in the game, they're going to check their pile here, and they're going to say, hey, I get to bring this 1 card out of my discard pile, or out of my dump into my discard pile. Then the next thing is there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cards left. The player then gets to choose 6 resources to destroy. So it gets to destroy 1 resource for every card in the garbage dump. So in this case, it would pretty much wipe out all of the stores that it has left. And this is what you want to do. You want to get cards in there and mill the AI deck down so that you can do that. Then all of these cards are going to come back in here. You're going to shuffle the AI deck. And the human player is going to get a technology. So the technology allows you to pay less for these spare part actions over here. All right. The human player, they also need to check this. Now, let's say that there is a bunch of cards in there. They are going to, number one, check the base to see how many cards are in the base. So for each card that's in the base, you get to take a card out of your garbage dump and put it into your discard pile. However many cards you put in here, you're going to lose that much defense. If it goes down to 0, you can't lose any more. You're fine. Whatever cards are left in here, these are going to deal you direct damage. So in this case, it would be 2. Then you would shuffle these cards up. You would recycle or refresh your deck. And then the AI player is going to get a technology token. And the AI uses these to refresh their protocols in the primary step, the primary phase of their step. So that is a general overview of how to play, how the cards react to player turns. Now, one of the actions you can do on your turn with these spare parts is you can remove one of these screws and upgrade add a new color to it. So in this case, if I use the spare parts, I can just remove one of these little screws, and it takes a little bit of a turn. You choose any other color that you want to put in there. And you screw the next one in. So this is going to allow you to get more and more resources on your turn. So the more of that action you can do, the better, because you basically want to be able to pay for everything you roll. And so the more dice that you can get with multiple... Oh, I guess I didn't screw that one in all the way. Oopsie. So there you go. You want to get as many of these multi-sided dice as you can so that you can generate more resources off your roll. That is the basic overview of how to play RONE Invasion, the co-op against the AI player. But if you just take all of this out, everything that I explained over here is pretty much relevant to the competitive play. If you want a good overview and a walkthrough of an entire turn, go ahead and watch the playthrough video I did for the co-op version, and that's going to give you an in-depth look of how everything actually works in practice. If you watch the entire video, you'll start to see the patterns and the different things that you can do. Because in there, I pretty much did everything you can possibly do. I used some of these actions. I used a lot of the spare parts actions. I used pretty much everything in here. The protocols came out and attacked me. I had to deal with a ton of these cards. I recruited and trained a bunch of cards. So you'll have to tune in to see how well I did and if I survived. I did make some errors that I realized after the fact, but it shouldn't have really detracted. It gave me a pretty good idea of how the game plays, and it will give you a really in-depth view of how the game plays. So go ahead and check that video out. Now let's go back up and see what I thought about RONE Invasion and the co-op mode. Okay, now that you have a general overview of how the game works, let's get into what I liked and what I didn't like. Now, starting off, I'm going to say this right up front. This game had a lot going on that I definitely liked, and I only have a few small minor gripes. So let's start with the pros. Let's start with what I really liked about the game. So if you know anything about me, if you watch the channel for any amount of time, you know I talk about a lot of deck builders. And I don't specifically talk about deck builders that I think are just kind of point salady. Ones that you're just recruiting cards to get into your deck to get more points. I don't like those. So the Dominions, the Ascensions, I don't particularly care for those. What I like are games like the Big Book of Madness, Marvel Legendary, the Hunger, all of the Legendary Encounters. I've tried several different deck builders, and I really like ones that do different mechanisms. They mix them together, so deck building is not the only thing going on. And specifically, games like G.I. Joe and Venom Assault, where you're using your cards to get dice in order to defeat bad guys. And this game has deck building, and it's got dice, but it's also got dice building. So one of my favorite things about this game is I really like the campaign style of the solo game. I am basically building a deck and my dice, but I'm building a deck in order to build up my own kind of army to fight against these aliens. And that deck is going to persist from game to game to game through this different scenarios of the campaign. So the main game comes with a 3 scenario campaign, and you're basically going to carry those things from one game to the next. So whatever cards you get, whatever dice you build, those are all going to carry on to the next game. And I really like that. So the deck building in this game is a little bit different in the way that it works. Instead of just on your turn, you get cards and you buy stuff and then you attack stuff. This game has a little bit of a different recruitment process. They actually use 2 different terms. They use recruit and they use train. So recruiting is basically getting a card out of the giant deck of cards, and those are going to go into your training center. And then over several turns throughout the game, you can slowly build up screws. It's one of the different resources in the game onto the cards, and the cards have a particular screw cost. So as you get more screws onto those cards, you're going to eventually get to train those cards completely, and they're going to come into your deck. And I really like that. It's a different kind of deck building mechanism that I haven't seen. So it's not just a one and done. You can there might be an expensive card out there, but you don't have to try and get it on that one turn. You can slowly build towards it over several turns of the game, and eventually you'll get that card in there. So it's not like Legendary, where the most powerful card, the rare, will come out, and then something in the game kills it because you can't get it, or it comes out early in the game and it clogs up a spot, and you really can't do anything with it. And you know that it's going to be a long time before you get that card, but in the meantime, it's just kind of clogging up a spot in the game. This game doesn't have that because you can slowly build towards those, so you're going to get those. You may only put 2 or 3 screws on it a turn, or maybe only 1, but eventually that card is going to be yours, and I really like that. I also really dig the art style in this game. This is kind of like a futuristic post-apocalyptic game. So think of like Mad Max mixed with Tron. So like you're in the future, but humanity's like on the brink of collapse, and it's you against these aliens. And the aliens they're not beaten down, and they're coming at you with all these robots and cool aliens and stuff. And you are this ragtag group of humans, and you're trying to fight back against them. So there's a really cool art style, and although they look the same, you can clearly see that like the human art stuff is more run down and kind of patchwork and held together with like bubble gum and duct tape, whereas the alien stuff looks like brand new, and it's clearly well maintained, and it's kind of reinforces that these are super powered compared to you, and you're really gonna have to be scrappy to fight against them. And I really like the art style, and it fits into the theme because it's not like everything looks glossy on both sides. The aliens look glossy and the humans really don't. One of the other things I really like about the deck building side of this game is the amount of things that you can do. So in a typical deck builder, you're given a certain amount of cards on your turn. That's your hand. This game doesn't have that. You have your deck, and on your turn, you can draw as many cards as you want. It's kind of a push your luck. Now, the downside to drawing those cards are number one, you have to be able to pay for them to use them. And number two, if you can't pay for them, and you can't get them recycled into your deck somehow, they're going to go into your garbage dump, which is bad. And number three, the more cards you take, the faster you get to having to reinforce your deck. And that, reinforcing is shuffling your deck. Once you need to draw cards, you don't have any. When you reinforce, you are giving your opponent some resources, and it's also hurting you. You're losing defense and life when you have to recycle your deck. So you don't want to do that very often. And I really like that depth of choice. It starts with how many cards you want to draw. So, and you get to see the card, so you can pick the card up, and you may notice, like, I got another green, I got another green, I got another green. And you know that getting that many greens is going to be difficult. So you might want to keep drawing so that you can get other colored cards, so you have a chance of rolling those dice and getting the cards into play. So I really like that. But on top of that, there's multiple systems going on. So first is drawing the cards. Then once you draw the cards, you have to decide what you want to play. And there's several factors going in there, because you may want to store resources to boost up your next turn or to do some of the resource actions. You're looking at the scrap on the bottom because maybe you want to do some of the scrap so the scrap power. So you're looking at which cards are going to give you the most scrap this turn. You're looking at the bad guys and how much it's going to take to damage them and get them out of the way. And you have to make this decision of, well, do I really care? Like, if I can gain enough life to offset what they're doing, or they're not really punching me for a lot, maybe I just take the damage and I really just focus on setting up my next turn so I have a really big turn next turn. Or, focus on these cards that are going to boost me up versus dealing damage. So there's all these little decisions you have to make, and it's a very deep system. And I really dig that. That is something that a lot of deck builders don't have. You basically play the card and you do it. This game, you can have a handful of cards and maybe you can only play one or two. And even once you've formulated a strategy, you still have to roll the dice. So when you roll the dice, you may get what you need, you may not get what you need. And you have to make a choice on the fly after you make that. So there's just all these layered decisions of what you want to do, which cards you're willing to throw into the garbage, which cards you really want to play, which scrap actions you want to do after you've played those cards. So there's all these decisions, and it's really cool. One of the other things I like is the dice. The dice building in this game, it feels familiar. It feels kind of like Dice Forge. But the way the dice work in this is each side of the die, it's a 6-sided die, has 3 pips. It starts out with one of each color on all 6 sides. So you get one, you're going to get 5 colors and then one completely blank. And throughout the game, you're gonna put new pips in there. And all you do is you have a little screwdriver and you give it like a 3/4 or a turn, and the little screw comes out, and then you put another screw in. And I think it's just a lot better than the way that Dice Forge handled it. And I know there's different things, because on there you're building the dice and the icons are on the dice. But that snap in and snap out function, just it's like trying to take apart Legos in that game. And sometimes it works easy; they pop out very easily, and then other times you got to like pry them out with another piece. And I don't know the long-term effects of those being snapped on and off, but they might start to get wear. You're going to hurt your finger probably trying to get them out. So I really like this screw mechanic where you screw it in and, replace it. I like that physically. And I wasn't sure if it was going to take a lot of time to do that, but it only took a few seconds to do it. So I was kind of concerned, like, is that going to factor in and add a bunch of time to the play, which is pulling these screws out and putting them back in. But it's really not. You're not screwing forever. You're like I said, it's maybe a full turn, maybe a half turn, a 3/4 turn. It's not a lot. And I really like that. It's really cool. And the dice are big and chunky. So let's just circle. There might be a couple more likes that I think of once I kind of go through the dislikes. But let's hit the dislikes, because I do have a few, a couple. And they're not really big. The first one is the playtime. The playtime for the solo game. And I only played the first campaign, the first scenario of the campaign. I haven't got to scenarios 2 and 3 yet. But in the first scenario, you are expected to survive for 16 rounds. So the game is going to go 16 rounds unless you die before then. And if you watch my playthrough video, you'll see that that video is about 3 hours long. Now, I do have a small teach in the beginning. That's probably about 20 to 30 minutes. and talking through the first couple turns, explaining things as they happen. Those added some time. But I looked online and at a couple other videos, and I did find another one for sure that was at least over 2 hours. And I don't even think that guy finished the game. I think he lost before finishing, so he didn't play the full 16 rounds. So if time is an issue for you, the solo mode is going to be fairly long. Even if you get the turns down to like 5 minutes a turn, you're looking at 16 rounds. That's easily well over an hour and 90 minutes. And I honestly don't think you'll be playing the turns that fast because you have so much decision making to do. It's not like I draw my 5 cards, I play my 5 cards, and I'm just deciding which order. No, you're going to make decisions at every point along the way. So your turns are not going to be lightning fast. You have a lot of decision points at every single step. And that's not a bad thing. That is really good that you have that many decision points. It's not like a typical deck builder where you're just drawing the cards and then you're like, well, I'm going to play this one, then this one, then this one. It's no, how many cards do I want to draw? Okay, what do I want to do? I roll the dice. What do I want to sacrifice? What do I want? And there's just all these decisions. So I never felt the game time. It was at the end when I looked at the video recording and I looked at my watch and I was like, wow, I've been playing for 3 hours. Again, that was with the teach in the beginning. But just to give you an idea, I had a drink that I got at the beginning of the game. I set it down on the table next to me. I started going. And then about 2 hours had gone by and I hadn't touched my drink yet. Like I was completely engrossed. So the time wasn't a negative for me, but I wanted to bring it out because if you don't have time, an hour and a half, 2 hours, and I think most of these solo games are going to take 2 hours. If you don't have that time in there, if you're not expecting to play that amount that long, it could be a turnoff for you if you don't like long games. So that there is that. I didn't find it too long. I mean, I played 6-hour games of Arkham, so it was fine for me, but just want to put it out there. The only other really negative thing I have to say, it's not really negative. The only negative I really have to talk about is the AI player board. The way the AI player board is set up is on the top you have the rounds. Then under that you have their kind of recruitment center where there's their cards out, and then under that you have the protocol section and the deploy troops deck. So I kept messing this up in the game because the flow doesn't match the board. So the first thing you do is you check for any beginning of turn card effects. If you have those, you fire those off. Then you tick the round marker up by 1. And then right underneath the round marker is the recruitment row. But you ignore that for this step and you go all the way down to the bottom of the board and you deploy your troops. And the reason why that's important is because the recruitment row you're going to train after you deploy. So those troops that deploy may put resources out onto those cards so that they can be trained on during the training phase. And I know in a few of the turns I messed up and I did the recruitment phase or the training of the recruitment section before I did the deploy troops. And I caught it and realized like, oh, this card needs to come out. But it might have changed how things worked because every time one of those cards gets trained, that nasty effect underneath is going to affect your deck or your cards somehow. So it might have skewed what I was doing. Granted, it's a solo game, so it's kind of like, oh, you recognize you messed up, you fix the mistake, and you keep going. But the ebb and flow of the board just doesn't really match with the steps of the AI player turn. So I kind of wish that the board was laid out a little bit different, either so that it was more vertical, so that it went down the row correctly. So it went deploy, then the troops, then the protocol phase at the bottom. The way the board's laid out, it's horizontal. So you basically start at the top, then you jump down to the bottom, then you go back up to the midsection, then you come back down to the bottom. And that back and forth, in my brain, I couldn't keep it straight. I had to consciously think to do it. And it kind of pulled me out of the experience every time I had to, no, wait, I need to jump back up first, jump back down, It's a small gripe, and I imagine if I played it enough times, I would start to get the flow. But through 16 rounds of the game, I think even towards the end, I was still having to struggle with doing that. And it's not a huge thing. It's not really going to affect what happens. And because it's not competitive, it's not really going to affect it that much. You just recognize your mistake and you move on. And that's really the only things that I wanted to mention that I really had a problem with. And they're not even that big of a problem. It's the time frame, which was fine for me. I was completely engrossed. And that AI player board. Other than that, I think everything is really cool about this game. I like the deck building. I like the dice building. I like physically how the dice work compared to like other games where you build dice. Because I know I use Dice Forge, but I know there's a couple other games that you build dice, and I just really like the way this one works. So yeah, overall, I really like RONE Invasion. The Kickstarter is going to be live by the time you're watching this. It went live on September 27th, 2022. It is on Kickstarter and is on BackerKit. Don't worry, we will have links to both of those campaigns down in our description notes. Also down in our description notes are links to all of our social media, Instagram, Twitter, Discord. Come and follow us. Check us out on Facebook. We put polls up all the time for what kind of videos you want to see, games to vote on. We also talk about contests that are coming up. We post those in Discord and in Facebook. So yeah, come check us out. As always, like, share, subscribe, hit that thumbs up button. It helps us defeat the YouTube algorithm so you can see more of our content and see more videos that you like, hopefully. That's it. Check out RONE Invasion. Let me know what you think. As always, happy gaming, and I'll see you next time. Bye.